Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. It was supposed to be another quiet patrol along the border of human space, 3 weeks into their mission, and nothing had happened except routine scans and the usual check-ins with nearby stations. Jake had started to think this would be the most boring assignment of his career. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Lieutenant Amy Chen said from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, and her voice carried a note of concern that made Jake turn around immediately. "What kind of strange?" he asked, walking over to her console. Amy adjusted her headset and frowned at the data scrolling across her screens. "It's a distress signal, sir. Very faint. Coming from the Ashfall Nebula region." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Ashfall Nebula was not a place anyone wanted to go. Dense radiation clouds made navigation dangerous, and sensors barely worked inside it. Most ships avoided it completely. "Can you clean it up?" he asked. Amy worked her controls for several minutes, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Slowly, the static began to clear. What came through next made everyone on the bridge freeze. Screams, the sound of weapons firing, then a voice, broken and desperate, crying out for help. Then nothing but static again. "Run it again," Jake ordered, his voice tight. The bridge crew listened in horror as the message played a second time. This time, Amy managed to pull out a few more details. There was a ship identification code buried in the transmission. When the computer matched it, Jake felt his blood run cold. "It's the Horizon's Dream," Amy whispered. "The colony ship that went missing 6 months ago." Everyone on the bridge knew about the Horizon's Dream. It had left Earth with 847 colonists aboard, heading for a new world at the edge of human space. Families, children, people looking for a fresh start. The ship had sent regular updates for the first 2 weeks, then went silent. Search parties found nothing. Most people assumed they had encountered some kind of mechanical failure or natural disaster. But this signal told a different story. Someone had attacked them. Jake made his decision in seconds. "Amy, send an emergency message to Fleet Admiral Kevin Rhodes. Tell him we're investigating. Navigation, plot a course for those coordinates. Engineering, I want shields at maximum and weapons ready." "Sir, the Ashfall Nebula is extremely dangerous," his navigator said carefully. "We could lose sensor capability in there." "Then we go in carefully," Jake replied. "But we're going in. Those are our people out there." It took 6 hours to get approval from Fleet Command. Admiral Rhodes himself appeared on the view screen, his weathered face serious. "Morrison, I'm authorizing your investigation, but you're not going alone. Commander Lisa Park is bringing the Vengeance, and Dr. Ryan Bennett is bringing the Mercy's Hand. Wait for them before you enter that nebula." "Yes, sir," Jake said. "What if we find who did this?" The Admiral's expression hardened. "Then you document everything. Every single detail. Understood?" 2 days later, 3 ships entered the Ashfall Nebula together. The journey through the radiation clouds was tense. Sensors flickered and died, then came back online. Navigation had to be done almost manually, using visual markers and careful calculations. After 12 hours of slow progress, they finally reached the coordinates from the distress signal. What they found made Jake's heart sink. The Horizon's Dream floated dead in space, its hull covered in burn marks and holes. Parts of the ship were torn open, exposed to vacuum. No lights showed in the windows. No engines glowed. It looked like a corpse drifting through the void. "Life signs?" Jake asked quietly. The sensor officer checked his screens twice before answering. "Minimal, sir. Maybe 6 or 7. They're clustered in one section of the ship." "Survivors," Amy breathed. Jake stood up. "I'm leading the boarding party, Danny. Get your Marines ready. Emma, prepare medical supplies. Lisa, Ryan, keep your ships on high alert. If whoever did this comes back, I want to know immediately." Sergeant Danny Cooper assembled a squad of 20 Marines in full combat armor. Field medic Emma Walsh joined them, carrying extra medical equipment. They crossed to the Horizon's Dream in a shuttle, docking at one of the few intact airlocks. The inside of the ship was worse than anything Jake had imagined. Bodies were everywhere, some in the corridors, some in rooms, some piled behind makeshift barricades where people had tried to defend themselves. The attackers had hunted them methodically, room by room. Blood stained the walls. Personal belongings were scattered across the floor. A child's toy lay abandoned in a doorway. "Stay focused," Jake told his team, though his own voice shook. "We need to find those survivors." They moved through the ship systematically. Danny's Marines checked every corner, every shadow. The signs of battle were everywhere. Weapon impacts on the walls, blast marks from alien firearms, evidence of breaches where the attackers had cut through doors and bulkheads. In the cargo bay, they found the worst scene. Dozens of bodies huddled together, families who had barricaded themselves in, hoping to hide. It hadn't worked. "Captain," Danny called from ahead. "Medical bay. I found them." Jake ran. In a sealed storage compartment behind the medical bay, they found 6 people, 3 children, huddled together and shaking. A woman named Laura Martinez, who held the children protectively. A man named Chris Sullivan, who had a makeshift weapon in his hands. And a security officer named Kyle Henderson, badly wounded and barely conscious. Emma immediately started treating Kyle while the others brought out the other survivors. They were terrified, malnourished, and traumatized. Laura kept repeating that it wasn't safe, that they might come back. "Who?" Jake asked gently. "Who did this?" Kyle coughed, blood on his lips. Emma tried to stop him from talking, but he pushed her hands away. "Krithak," he whispered. "They came without warning. Said we were being harvested. Took 40 people alive. The rest—" He couldn't finish. Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. The Krithak sovereignty. They had a non-aggression pact with humanity. They were supposed to be neutral neighbors. "Where did they take the others?" Jake asked. Kyle tried to answer, but his body gave out. Emma worked desperately to save him, but his injuries were too severe. He died minutes later, his last words still unspoken. Jake stood slowly, looking around at the horror surrounding them. 800 people had boarded this ship with dreams of a new life. Now only 6 remained, and 40 more were prisoners of an alien empire that apparently saw humans as raw materials to harvest. He tapped his communicator. "Admiral Rhodes, this is Captain Morrison. You need to see this. All of it." The images from the Horizon's Dream spread through Earth's networks within hours. Every news channel showed them. Every social media feed shared them. The Coalition Council tried to control the release, but it was too late. Humanity saw what had happened to the colonists. They saw the bodies. They heard the survivors' testimonies. They learned that 40 of their people were still prisoners somewhere in Krithak space. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Jake watched it unfold from the bridge of the Defiant as they escorted the survivors back to the nearest human station. Protests erupted on every human world. People demanded action. Military recruitment centers saw lines forming around the block. Cargo companies volunteered their ships for military conversion. Mining colonies started working triple shifts to produce materials for weapons and ammunition. Ambassador Patricia Grant tried to contact the Krithak sovereignty through official channels. She demanded an explanation. She asked for the return of the prisoners. She requested a meeting to discuss the incident. The Krithak response came 3 days later. It was brief and dismissive. The Horizon's Dream had entered restricted Krithak space without authorization. The incident was regrettable but justified. No prisoners would be released. No further discussion was warranted. The message played on the view screen in the Coalition Council chambers. 200 representatives from Earth's nations and off-world colonies watched in stunned silence. Then Fleet Admiral Kevin Rhodes stood up. "I've served in Earth's space forces for 32 years, he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "I've seen a lot in that time. Wars, accidents, tragedies, but I've never seen anything like what happened to the Horizon's dream. Those people weren't soldiers. They weren't a threat. They were families. They were children. And the Krithak hunted them like animals." He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. "We didn't claw our way up from one planet, fighting through our own conflicts and finally reaching the stars just to watch aliens harvest our children. The Krithak think we're weak. They think we'll accept their dismissal and move on. They're wrong." The vote was called immediately. Every single representative voted yes. Authorization for military response was granted with unanimous consent. Jake received new orders that evening. He was promoted to Commodore and given command of a battle group. His new flagship would be the carrier Independence, currently being fitted with additional weapons systems at the shipyards above Mars. His mission was clear and direct. Find the Krithak research facilities, rescue the prisoners, make the Krithak understand that humanity was not prey. But the mobilization went beyond just Jake's new command. Across human space, something unprecedented was happening. The massacre had awakened something deep in humanity's collective consciousness, something primal, something that remembered when humans themselves had been prey on their own world before they learned to fight back. Every nation contributed ships. Every colony sent volunteers. Engineers worked around the clock, upgrading weapon systems and shields. Scientists developed new tactics specifically for fighting Krithak vessels. Intelligence officers gathered every piece of information they could find about Krithak military capabilities and facility locations. Lieutenant Eric Hayes, an intelligence analyst on Earth, made a crucial discovery. He found records of similar incidents involving the Krithak over the past century. 3 other species had been targeted for harvesting. One species was now extinct. The other 2 had become client states of the Krithak sovereignty, essentially servants. The Krithak saw this as the natural order. The strong consumed the weak. They had done it before, and they would do it again. What they didn't understand was that humanity had spent thousands of years fighting against natural order. Humans had survived ice ages, diseases, predators, and their own conflicts through stubbornness and refusal to give up. They had gone from prey animals cowering in caves to masters of their world, not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being too stubborn to quit. Now they were bringing that same stubbornness to the stars. Jake stood in the hangar bay of the Independence, watching as the last fighters were loaded aboard. His crew was assembling. Ships from a dozen nations were gathering at the rally point beyond Mars. Medical teams, Marines, engineers, support staff, all preparing for what was being called Operation Broken Chain. Commander Lisa Park approached him, now captain of her own destroyer. "They're calling us Retribution Fleet," she said. Jake nodded slowly. "That's appropriate." "Are we really doing this?" Lisa asked quietly. "Going to war with the Krithak sovereignty? They're 3 times our size. They've been in space for centuries while we've barely been out here for one." Jake thought about the children huddled in that storage compartment. He thought about Kyle Henderson dying while trying to tell them where the prisoners had been taken. He thought about 800 people who had boarded a colony ship with hope and dreams. "Yes," he said simply. "We're doing this." Intelligence finally located the first target 3 weeks later, a Krithak research station in the Zeta 7 system, approximately 6 days' travel from the last known position of the Horizon's dream. Reconnaissance drones confirmed it was heavily defended, with a fleet of 12 Krithak warships in orbit around it. Admiral Rhodes gave Jake his final orders in a private communication. "I'm giving you full tactical authority, Commodore. But remember, we're not just fighting for revenge, We're fighting to show the Krythak and every other species out there that humans protect their own. Document everything. Transmit everything. Let the galaxy watch." Jake assembled his fleet. 47 ships, fighters, destroyers, cruisers, support vessels, and the Independence at the center. It was the largest human battle group ever assembled for a single operation. Before they jumped to the Zeta-7 system, Jake made a broadcast to his fleet. Every ship, every crew member heard his words. "The Krythak think they know us," he said. "They think we're just another weak species they can harvest and consume. They're wrong. We're the species that survived everything our own world could throw at us. We're the species that turned our greatest weakness into our greatest strength. We don't have claws or armor or natural weapons, but we have each other. And we never, ever leave our people behind." He paused, looking at the faces on his screen. Humans from every nation on Earth, every colony in space, all united by one thing. "The 40 prisoners from the Horizon's Dream are waiting for us. They're scared, they're alone. But they're not abandoned. We're coming for them. And anyone who stands in our way is going to learn exactly why you don't hurt humanity's children." The fleet jumped to the Zeta-7 system with weapons hot and shields at maximum. The Krythak defensive fleet detected them immediately and moved to intercept. They probably expected the humans to back down, to negotiate, to be reasonable. They were wrong about that too. The battle lasted 47 minutes. Human ships fought with a precision and fury that shocked the Krythak commanders. Fighters swarmed the enemy vessels, targeting specific weak points that intelligence had identified. Destroyers coordinated their attacks, overwhelming shields through focused fire. The Independence launched wave after wave of bombers that punched through Krythak defenses. When it was over, the Krythak defensive fleet was destroyed, the station's shields were down, and Jake gave the order that would change everything. "Marines, you are authorized to board. Rules of engagement are clear. Rescue the prisoners, secure the facility, and remember we're being watched. Show them who we are." Lieutenant Danny Cooper, now promoted to captain, led the first wave of Marines into the station. They had trained for this moment for weeks. Every corridor was mapped, every potential resistance point identified. But nothing could prepare them for what they found. The prisoners were in cages, not cells, but actual cages designed for animals. Krythak researchers moved between them, taking samples, conducting experiments, treating sentient beings like laboratory specimens. When the Marines burst in, the Krythak reached for weapons. They didn't get the chance to use them. Danny's Marines moved through the facility like a storm. Every prisoner was freed. Every researcher was detained. Every piece of equipment was documented and cataloged. And when they found the human prisoners from the Horizon's Dream, alive but traumatized, something broke in the Marines' professional composure. The children recognized Laura Martinez, who had survived with them. They rushed to her, crying. The adults collapsed in relief. One woman kept repeating, "You came. You actually came." Of course they came. That's what humans did. But the rescued prisoners revealed something that changed the entire operation. This wasn't the only facility. The Krythak had 17 such stations across their empire, all conducting similar research on various species. The Horizon's Dream incident wasn't unique. It was standard procedure. Jake stood on the bridge of the Independence, looking at the list of facility locations that intelligence had compiled from captured data. 17 stations, thousands of prisoners from multiple species. He opened a communication channel on all frequencies, broadcasting to every ship, every station, every world within range. He knew the Krythak would hear it. He wanted them to. "This is Commodore Jake Morrison of the Earth Space Coalition, commanding Retribution Fleet. We came to the Zeta-7 system to recover our people. We found them, but we also found prisoners from other species, taken and caged and treated as test subjects. The Krythak sovereignty believes this is their right, that the strong can harvest the weak without consequence." He paused, letting his words echo through space. They're wrong. As of this moment, the Earth Space Coalition is conducting Operation Broken Chain. We will locate every harvesting facility in Krithak space. We will free every prisoner, and we will dismantle this barbaric practice permanently. To the Krithak sovereignty, we say this clearly. You took our people. You hurt our children. We are coming for all of them, every single one, and we are coming for you. The message was heard across the galaxy. Other species, some of whom had lost their own people to Krithak harvesting, listened in disbelief. Humanity, barely a century into space travel, had just declared war on one of the most powerful empires in the region. Admiral Rhodes made it official 6 hours later. 60% of humanity's naval power was being committed to Operation Broken Chain. Multiple battle groups, each assigned specific targets. The orders were explicit and uncompromising. Free the prisoners, document everything, destroy the facilities, eliminate any resistance. Across human space, the response was overwhelming. More volunteers than could be accepted showed up at recruitment centers. Civilian ships were donated to the military. Families with loved ones in the service sent messages of support. Earth's nations, often divided on other issues, stood united on this one. The Krithak had made a critical mistake. They had assumed humanity would respond like the other species they had harvested. Fear, submission, acceptance of the new reality. They didn't understand that humans had a saying about that. An old saying from the early days of space exploration. Not on our watch. Operation Broken Chain moved with relentless efficiency. Jake's Retribution fleet was just one of 6 battle groups now hunting Krithak facilities. Each group followed the same pattern. Arrive in overwhelming force, destroy defensive fleets, board the facility, free the prisoners, document everything, then broadcast it all to the galaxy. The second facility fell in 4 days, the third in a week. Each victory revealed more prisoners, more evidence of Krithak cruelty, more proof that this wasn't an isolated incident but systematic policy. Other species began to react. The Council of Civilized Worlds, the loose alliance of spacefaring races, called an emergency session. The Krithak ambassador tried to justify their actions, claiming cultural differences and sovereign rights. Then humanity presented the evidence. Hours of recordings from the facilities, testimony from freed prisoners, medical reports showing what had been done to sentient beings. The ambassador's justifications fell apart under the weight of documented atrocities. But the Krithak sovereignty didn't surrender. They couldn't. Their entire society was built on the idea of strength and domination. To back down to a species they considered inferior would undermine everything they believed. So they mobilized their military for war. Jake watched the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The Krithak were pulling ships from border regions, consolidating their forces. It would make the remaining facilities more heavily defended, but it also meant the Krithak were taking humanity seriously. Good. They should. The turning point came at the Battle of Krithak Prime's orbital ring. The Krithak High Council made their stand there, assembling the largest fleet they had ever deployed in defense of their homeworld. 200 warships, including their flagship dreadnoughts. Admiral Rhodes committed 5 battle groups to the assault. Jake's Retribution fleet would lead the attack. The night before the battle, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked through the Independence, talking to crew members. They were nervous, but determined. They knew the odds. They knew how many ships they might lose. But when Jake asked if anyone wanted to be reassigned to rear support duties, not a single person volunteered. "Sir," one young pilot said, "my sister was on the Horizon's Dream. She was 7 years old. Her name was Sophie. I'm flying tomorrow for her." Jake heard dozens of similar stories. Everyone had someone, a cousin on a colony. A friend who traveled near Krithak space, a child who would grow up safer if humanity won this fight. The battle began at dawn, ship time. Human forces jumped into the system in 3 waves, each targeting specific sections of the Krythak defensive formation. The fighting was brutal. Ships exploded on both sides. The void filled with debris and energy weapons fire. The Independence took heavy damage to its port side, forcing Jake to shift his flag to a cruiser. But humanity had something the Krythak didn't expect: coordination. Every human ship knew exactly where every other ship was, what they were doing, how to support each other. The Krythak fought as individual captains seeking glory. Humans fought as one unified force. After 6 hours, the Krythak formation began to break. After 9 hours, their flagship dreadnoughts were in retreat. After 12 hours, the orbital ring was under human control. Jake stood on the bridge of his temporary flagship, exhausted and wounded from a console explosion. The ship's doctor had bandaged his arm, but he refused to leave the bridge. This next part was too important. He opened a direct channel to the Krythak High Council. When their faces appeared on the screen, Jake saw fear for the first time. "Good. Your harvest is over," he said simply. "You will release every prisoner from every facility. You will dismantle all harvesting operations. You will submit to inspections by the Council of Civilized Worlds, or we will do it for you, and trust me when I say you don't want us to do it for you." The High Council deliberated for 3 days while human ships maintained orbit over their homeworld. The entire galaxy watched and waited. Finally, the Krythak sovereignty capitulated. The treaty was harsh. The Krythak released all prisoners from all species. They paid massive reparations. They submitted to decade-long oversight of all research facilities. They ceded 3 border systems to create a buffer zone under human control. But the real change wasn't in the treaty. It was in what came after. The freed prisoners returned to their homeworlds with stories of the humans who had fought for them. Species that had been enemies of humanity suddenly requested diplomatic talks. The Council of Civilized Worlds invited humanity to join as a full member, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But the most significant change was proposed by Laura Martinez, one of the survivors from the Horizon's dream. She stood before the Council and proposed the creation of the Galactic Protection Initiative, a multi-species military force dedicated to preventing atrocities like harvesting from ever happening again. Humanity contributed the largest fleet to this new organization, not because they wanted to dominate it, but because they understood something fundamental. Freedom and safety weren't gifts given by the strong to the weak. They were rights that had to be defended, constantly and vigilantly. Jake Morrison returned to Earth a hero. Parades were held in his honor. He received medals and commendations from every nation. But he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had done what needed to be done. Every year, he visited the memorial built for the Horizon's dream victims. 800 names carved into black stone. Most of them had bodies that were never recovered, lost in the void, but their names were remembered. A reporter interviewed him there on the 5th anniversary of the massacre. She asked why humanity had responded so strongly, why they had risked so much for people who were already gone. Jake looked at the memorial for a long moment before answering. "We learned something on Earth, long before we reached the stars," he said quietly. "Evil thrives when good people do nothing. When people see injustice and look away. When the strong prey on the weak and nobody stands up. We fought wars about this. We lost millions of people learning this lesson. And we decided, as a species, that we would never forget it." He turned to face the camera directly. "When we heard that distress call from the Horizon's dream, we had a choice. We could have decided it was too dangerous, too far away, too risky. We could have mourned the dead and moved on. But that's not who we are. That's not who we'll ever be." The reporter pressed him. "But the Krythak were stronger than you, more advanced. You could have lost that war." Jake smiled slightly. "Probably, but we would have tried anyway, because those were our people out there, and humans don't abandon their own. 5 years after the Ashfall Massacre, as it came to be known, the Ashfall Nebula was renamed the Horizons Memorial Zone. A station was built there, serving as the headquarters for the Galactic Protection Initiative. Ships from a dozen species patrolled the region, ensuring that no one would ever suffer the same fate again. Ambassador Amy Chen, formerly a lieutenant on the Defiant, gave the dedication speech at the station's opening. She stood at a podium facing thousands of representatives from across the galaxy. Behind her, the hulk of the Horizon's dream had been preserved as a memorial, a reminder of what they were all fighting to prevent. 5 years ago, Amy began, 847 humans boarded a ship with dreams of a new life. They were teachers and engineers, farmers and artists. They were parents and children. They were us, and they sent out a distress call when evil came for them. She paused, looking around at the assembled crowd. That distress call changed everything, not just for humanity, but for every species represented here today, because it forced all of us to ask a simple question: what kind of galaxy do we want to live in? One where the strong prey on the weak without consequence, or one where we stand together to protect each other? The crowd was silent, listening intently. Humanity chose to stand, not because we were the strongest, not because we were the bravest, but because we remembered what it felt like to be prey. We remembered our own history, our own struggles, our own hard-won lessons, and we decided that we would never let anyone else suffer what the people on the Horizon's dream suffered. Amy smiled then, a genuine smile that lit up her face. But we didn't do it alone. Every species here contributed to the Galactic Protection Initiative. Every one of you decided that some things are worth fighting for. That protecting the innocent isn't just humanity's responsibility, but all of ours together. She gestured to the memorial behind her. This station stands in honor of those who died, but it also stands as a promise that their deaths meant something, that their sacrifice led to change, that because of them, the galaxy is a better, safer place. The dedication ceremony ended with a moment of silence, followed by the lighting of 847 memorial beacons, one for each victim. The lights spread across the station's exterior, visible for thousands of kilometers in every direction, a constellation of remembrance. After the ceremony, Jake Morrison found Amy standing alone, looking at the Horizon's dream through a viewport. He joined her quietly. "Do you think we did enough?" Amy asked softly. Jake considered the question. 5 years of change, the Galactic Protection Initiative, new treaties, new friendships between species. The end of harvesting across multiple empires, not just the Krithak. Thousands of lives saved. "I think we did what we could," he said finally. "The galaxy is better than it was. Not perfect, but better." Amy nodded slowly. "The Krithak are changing too. Did you hear? Their new High Council outlawed all sentient experimentation last month. It's actually a crime now in their society." "Cultural change takes time," Jake said, "but it happens, especially when people decide it needs to happen." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the memorial beacons shine. Finally, Amy spoke again. "You know what the other species call us now? The Guardians. They say humans are the guardians of the weak." Jake shook his head. "We're not guardians. We're just people who remember what it's like to be scared, to be vulnerable, to need help." He turned to face her. "That distress call from the Horizon's dream, it wasn't just a signal asking for rescue, it was a reminder." "A reminder of what?" Amy asked. "Of who we are," Jake said simply. "Humans are the species that hears the cries for help and responds. We're the ones who see injustice and get angry enough to do something about it. We're the ones who, when faced with a choice between what's easy and what's right, choose what's right." "Every time." Amy smiled. "Is that what you're going to tell your grandchildren when they ask about all this?" Jake laughed. If I have grandchildren, I'm going to tell them about 847 people who dreamed of a new world. I'm going to tell them about 6 survivors who refused to give up. I'm going to tell them about 40 prisoners who held on long enough for rescue to arrive. And I'm going to tell them that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to look away when someone needs help. Across the galaxy, the effects of that choice continued to ripple outward. New alliances formed. Old enemies reconsidered their positions. Species that had never worked together began coordinating on protection efforts. The Galactic Protection Initiative grew from a few dozen ships to hundreds, then thousands. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species viewed humanity. Before the Ashfall massacre, humans were seen as newcomers, young, inexperienced, unproven. Now, when humans spoke in the Council of Civilized Worlds, others listened. Not because humans had won a war, but because they had fought one for the right reasons. The Horizon's Dream Memorial became a place of pilgrimage. People from across the galaxy visited to pay their respects, to remember, to reflect on what had been lost and what had been gained. Every visitor received a small token, a replica of the memorial beacon, with words inscribed on it in their own language. The inscription was the same one that appeared on the station's main entrance. Amy Chen had written it for the dedication, but it came to represent humanity's place in the galaxy. We didn't come to the galaxy to conquer. We didn't come to dominate. But we came with a promise. Wherever humans go, we will stand between the predator and the prey. We will be the line that cannot be crossed. Because that distress call wasn't just a signal. It was a reminder of who we are and who we will always be. We are humanity, and we do not abandon our own. Those words became humanity's unofficial motto among the stars. They were printed on ships, taught in schools, repeated by soldiers heading into dangerous situations, because they were true. When the next crisis came, 10 years later, humanity responded exactly as everyone expected. A mining colony under attack by raiders sent out a distress call. Human ships arrived first, despite being 3 systems away. They drove off the raiders, stayed to help rebuild, and left only when they were sure the colony was safe. When asked why they risked their own ships for a colony of a species they barely knew, the human captain gave a simple answer. Because someone needed help. That's reason enough. And it was. The galaxy learned that about humanity in those years following the Ashfall massacre. Humans might not be the strongest species. They might not be the fastest or the smartest or the most advanced. But they were the ones who showed up when disaster struck. They were the ones who stood up to bullies. They were the ones who, when they heard a cry for help, dropped everything to respond. Because that's what humans did. That's what they had always done. From the earliest days on their home world when they learned to work together to survive. From the moment they reached the stars, they brought that same instinct with them. The instinct to protect, to defend, to stand together. The distress call from the Horizon's Dream had ignited humanity's rage, yes. But it had ignited something else, too. It had reminded every human on every world, in every station across their growing space, of their core identity. They were the species that answered the call, always, without fail, no matter the cost, and the galaxy was better for it.